Welcome. If you've been here before, this view here may be familiar. This is where the old French cleat wall and workbench used to be, but what may not be familiar is this, which is a Mitre Station. So back in the last tour of this workshop that I did, I talked through the plans to build this Mitre Station. If we carry on over, we've got the French cleat wall. That's going to go and be replaced by a Mitre Station that basically takes up this whole wall. But again, I'll talk through that in a second. It's been a little longer than a second. In fact, it's been about a year and a half, but you know, it is finally here. But yeah, this is stage one of a whole rework of the entire workshop. So if you look over here, this is where the old storage wall was. That's all obviously come down, and that's been replaced with this workbench here. So now I have a giant, start this in, I have a giant L that goes all the way down there. In total, I've got about 8 meters of workbench against the walls now, which is obviously very handy, but until I can put some cabinetry up there, all of the stuff I have is still living on the side, which is why that workbench is just covered in rubbish. But that's not this video. This video is all about building the Mitre Station, so get into that. Okay, so while this demolition phase goes on, I'll talk a little bit about the motivation for why this is happening now, and the two main reasons for it are time or efficiency and quality. So the workshop in the state that it was in before I tore it apart here was built naturally over the course of the last few years as I sort of started this channel and started doing the hobby in any semi-serious capacity. But as I've done it, I've started to build larger projects. My time has become more limited as things happen in life, and that means that how it existed didn't allow for those things to happen in the most efficient way. So this whole rework is attempting to address that. Okay, that is significant progress. Whole wall is down. Yeah, we won't worry about that. Anyway, what we're doing now, building the frame for the workbench. It's going to go there. So I've got some 2.4 meter lengths. I'm going to space them so in the end the workbench is going to be 700 mil deep. Now while I build out the back workbench, I'll talk through a little bit of the logic of why in a small workshop I'm going for 8 meters of fixed workbench when most of the advice you'll see online is that everything in a small workshop should be floating. And the honest truth is I just disagree with that in the way that I find I work. So I use the Mitre saw a lot, and what I need for that is for workpieces to be supported on both sides. So I need a large Mitre Station for that. As I say, this is a multi-part series that I'm going to be doing on building out the workshop, and future videos are going to deal with how I will handle the problem of cutting down sheet material. But you'll see at the end of this video, I'm absolutely chuffed with this solution for the Mitre Station, and I think it's a real improvement for the workshop in the first step. So hopefully you can see I've got this support, which is going to go here. I've got a support on the back wall and a support on the end wall, and you can hopefully see that they've all been cut to be the same height. So this I'm going to put into place there, and then I can take the frame and set it on top of all these. Oh, so it's in, and the measurements kind of worked, but it's also a bit of a lesson in planning forward, because the height of the workbench clashes with that. I can leave a hole here where I can feed the wires down, and then I can have an extension cord. But initially that's a success. It feels pretty firm. And then I'll put one of these tops on and we'll be good for one with workbenches. Okay, it's almost impossible to film with the garage as it is, so I haven't been filming all of it. But to get this next workbench on the wall, what I've done is I have put a screw into the wall at the right height where this needs to be sitting, and I've rested it on there. And I've then, let me come around here, I've then clamped 2 long bits of wood to the workbench so I know that they're running parallel to this workbench, and extended them to the end. I've then put a spacer bit of plywood in that's the same thickness as this worktop, and I've clamped this long run to this. So I know that it's the same level as the workbench here when the top goes on it, and I know that it's the correct length down there. So in theory, I can just screw this to the wall, and then I have a platform on which I can then build out the rest of it. Okay, I just tried to crack on with it, but I've got to the point now where this framing is done. I've gone for a different type of framing on this workbench because the pocket hole system I thought was a little bit weak on this one, but this side will be the one that bears most of the weight because this is going to be the Mitre Station. So having put these in now, if I try to give it all a shake, the whole thing, including this side here, is very solid. So I think we're good to just whack the top on, and then the L is done. Okay, here's a good example of why I'm doing this. I need to cut this down to 60 centimeters, and as you can see, I have barely got enough room to get this up and onto the table saw and then through. And the current workshop setup just doesn't allow for this to happen in any safe way. So the L-shaped workbench and then a floating workbench with a track saw is going to be the solution to when I want to take on bigger projects like this. But for the minute, I've got to try and just wrangle this through. Try and not do that again. Okay, so I've just put it on top as a test fit, and then what I'm doing is marking the little notches where it needs to be cut out to fit around the corners. Looks like it worked. Okay, here we go. It's in place. I'll sort out the excess in a bit. Here we are. It's not a perfect join. I did do it with a jigsaw, but I've got a plan for that. But yeah, there we go. We've got ourselves an L. So with the first L done, the next bit to do is to box in that L, so you can then start to build the mitre saw off of it. And I trimmed off the excess like I said I would, but I did a bit of a bad job of doing that, as my face tells here. Okay, the next thing is to build the Mitre Station platform. It's going to come off of here, and then the mitre saw will sit right here. So what I've come up with is this, which is about as simple as a frame gets. It's just 4 pieces of wood. I'm going to drill in a hole and drive in a screw. There you go. And that can just sit on here like that. So I built 2 of these platforms so that the top and bottom of the mitre saw station gap is even, which I'm just attaching here. And then to get the mitre saw at the right height, I measured how tall the base, I guess it is, of the mitre saw is, and then I built this little L lip that I can put over the end of the workbench, and then I can set the mitre saw up to it and clamp it to it, and that gives me where I need to attach it in, because that's at the perfect height to make sure the mitre saw is level with the workbenches at the end. Okay, I started screwing in the other side, but I realized by getting close that I had not aligned this edge to the front edge of there, so let me try and fix that. In theory, I can now put the mitre saw on there and it will be level. There it is in place. Should be set just below the level of this, maybe like a mil or 2, and that's so I can shim it up to the level it needs to be. But it's looking pretty good. So to finish off the project, all that was needed to do was to build the right-hand outfeed table of the mitre station, or the right-hand worktop, and again simple box framing, which I'll just attach to that right-hand upright of where the mitre saw is sat. This bit I've just cut here, you can see is going to sit on the right side, and that's the other side of what I'm going to attach this box framing to. And that's as simple as this workbench needs to be. I do think people have a tendency to overcomplicate these things when you watch YouTube videos about it. You can see it's pretty sturdy there, and has plenty of storage space now for all of the stuff that I intend to store underneath it, which is, again, a large part of this, but I'll go through that in a future video. Now, at this point, the big structure of the Mitre Station is actually done, but you can see here there's a bit of a oversight in how I designed it, because you can't actually twist the Mitre Saw to reach its full angle of cut. So I just measured off where that full angle would be, and then I cut out with a jigsaw, I guess, yeah, along that angle and then down, so that eventually, once all the material's removed, the Mitre Saw can be put to its largest degree of cut angle. Just in case you don't believe me, here I am demonstrating that it can now go to its full angle of cut. So yeah, that is the whole thing complete. Here's a dramatic slow pan shot to prove that. I don't even think I've slowed this down. I think that's just how steady my hand is. Look at that. Fantastic. What cameramanship. Anyway, so there it is. You know, it's kind of exactly what I hoped it'd be, which is good. I'm actually chuffed with it. There's loads of finishing stuff to do, so I've got to put some, wood on the edges to make it a little tidier. Also, just give a little bit of protection to these worktops because they're just MDF sheets. I'm going to add some drawers and cupboards underneath. Obviously, I'm going to do the cabinets up there. All of this will be in future videos, but for now, the structure of the Mitre Station is done. And it can be used for its purpose, which is to cut wood. And I have about 2.5 meters of outfeed either side of the Mitre Saw. So if I get a full length of timber like this, it can be cut either side of the Mitre Saw and be fully supported. Or if I was to take a full length of timber like this and chop it in half, I'll no longer face the issue that I was facing, where post it being chopped, one of the sides would fall off because it was unsupported, and then you've got this giant spinning blade and a piece of loose wood, and it's all a bit dangerous. So yeah, other good things about this, obviously I've got the Mitre Saw station, that's fine, but what I can also do now, which has been a pain in the ass, is take the planer and take the table saw and store them underneath the workbench when I'm not using them, which is more frequent than not. They're just floating in the middle, getting in the way. So now they're nicely tucked up out the way under the workbench, and that's just freed up all this space in the middle for me to, I don't know, practice my handstands and stuff. Anyway, thanks for watching. Apologies, this one's been a bit more loosely filmed, should we say. But, sometimes you just have to crack on and do things instead of setting up shots and everything, and this is one of those. So, yeah, quality of that video, not the highest, but, this should free up a lot of potential for builds and the channel. So, yeah, stick around. Should improve. Subscribe if you can. If you don't want to, I understand. All good.